Okay, so we just finished looking at the different life cycles of insects and the different stages within those life cycles. All of that growth and that change, this requires insects in whatever life stage they're in to shed their exoskeleton in order to create enough room to actually grow new tissue. The process of shedding is called molting. Now, an exoskeleton is made up of 4 major layers. The first 3 layers together are called the cuticle. So this starts with a relatively thin, what we call epicuticle. Epi means outside, so epicuticle. The epicuticle is somewhere between 0.1 and 3 micrometers thick, so it's super, super thin, and it's comprised of proteins and of lipids, so proteins and fats. Sometimes, in some species, it can contain a little bit of chitin, but that's not very common. Primarily, it's proteins and lipids. Basically, it's this unsupportive, inextensible type of layer that has all these chemical properties. So this is the layer that is in direct contact with the environment. So it has to have all these chemical properties in order to fully protect the insect. One of its main functions is to prevent dehydration. Remember that whole large surface to volume ratio? Okay, dehydration is a real problem. So it's accomplished through those lipids, through those water-repelling or hydrophobic lipids that are found on the surface. So this basically creates a seal on the surface of the exoskeleton, keeping all of this liquid in. The second layer is the thick procuticle. So the procuticle is made up of 2 layers in and of itself, the exocuticle, meaning outside, and the endocuticle, meaning inside. So the procuticle contains really high levels of chitin. This is where we see all that N-acetylglucosamine, right? And we see some protein, usually in the form of sclerotin and a few other things. So this exocuticle, that portion is a really tough, really hard portion or layer that is used for protection, while the endocuticle is very, very flexible. The final layer of this full exoskeleton is called the epidermis. This lies just beneath the endocuticle or just beneath the procuticle there. This epidermis is a single layer of living cells. And these cells will play a major role in this whole molting process. What this epidermis does, I mean, think about it like our own epidermis. It's our own skin, right? So this epidermis is going to secrete cuticular compounds. It's going to secrete lipids and waxes and cements and pheromones and defensive compounds, all of that sort of stuff. And it's going to govern when exactly the molt happens. All right, so the shedding of the exoskeleton, that act is called molting. It's an extremely complex process that involves hormones and behaviors and cuticular changes and epidermal changes that all have to happen in a particular sequence and happen at a particular time to get rid of that old cuticle and form a new one. So when I was going through school, I think I spent 2 or 3 separate classes, weeks upon weeks, going through this entire molting process. I'm going to give you just a couple of slides, so it's not even close to what's going on. All right, but in basic terms, the process of molting will break up the insect life cycle into what we call instars. Okay, so these are periods from one molt to the next. An instar is a period from one molt to the next. So the molt begins, and as you can see with this video playing right here, the molt begins with the separation of the epidermal cells from the old cuticle. So this new area opens up this new area, and a new layer called cuticulin is created in the space left over. The space fills with this molting fluid, which has all these active molting enzymes, and it's formed from inactive chitin and from protein lysine enzymes. So then the outer layer of the epicuticle, this is secreted by the epidermal cells. So this new epicuticle is secreted by the epidermal cells. That's what's happening there in the video now. This molting fluid begins acting on the old cuticle. It breaks everything down until just the barest bit of that old cuticle is left over, because the insect wants to reuse all of those proteins, all those waxes, those carbohydrates, those sorts of things. Want to reuse it in the new cuticle and other body processes. So as that is happening, new cuticle is being laid down just continually. Once the new cuticle is just about ready, then the insect moves on to ecdysis. Ecdysis is the actual shedding of the old exoskeleton. So this begins when the old cuticle splits along the dorsal midline, and it splits because the insect will take in all this excess air through its trachea, and it'll expand with a whole bunch of hemolytic pressure. So then the insect's going to split open its old exoskeleton, and it's going to wiggle its way out of the old cuticle. It's going to leave behind something called the exuvium. So the exuvium is just what's left over of that old exoskeleton. When the insect is free from that old cuticle, it's going to expand the new cuticle and become larger. Once it's gotten to the size it needs, the new cuticle is going to sclerotize through this process called sclerotinization. It's going to harden, and it's going to provide that protection during the next instar. So this video that I have playing for you right here, I have this video up on eCampus if you'd like to rewatch it over and over again, and it's got some audio with it.
Almost always, when an insect molts or pupates, it has to adhere its last abdominal segment to a surface. After that, they can begin their contractions. In this situation, they are relatively defenseless against attacks by other insects. Even an aphid can walk safely over a ladybit larva that is about to shed its skin.
Now, during the sclerotinization period, just after the molt, the insect is very, very vulnerable to external dangers. It has a markedly different appearance from the normal insect. This is a cockroach. This is a Madagascar hissing cockroach. So you see this color change? So here is the exuvium. Here is the exuvium on the right. This is its old normal color. This is what the newly molted insect looks like. It's bright white. Okay, so it can take about 45 minutes to change from this white stage to the fully sclerotized and protected stage. During this time, it tends to hide. This is because it's very, very vulnerable. I can't tell you how many times I've gotten people all excited because they found some sort of albino cockroach. Okay, basically, they will go into some protected area, they'll pick up a box, and they'll find this bright white cockroach. They think it just doesn't have any coloration. It's albino. Ah, how exciting, they found something new. It's not new. It's simply a newly molted species or newly molted individual. Okay, after about 45 minutes, it's going to turn into its normal body form, and it'll be just fine. Now, the period between these molts is called the instar. So that's the word right there. And depending on the species, depending on environmental conditions, different species, different insects have a different number of larval or nymphal instars before they're ready to reach the adult stage. So these molts are going to continue until the insect reaches adulthood. When the insect is an adult, it usually doesn't molt anymore. So this cycle of molting and ecdysis leads to a discontinuous growth curve in insects. So this shows a period of no growth punctuated by a whole bunch of really rapid growth. And you end up with a sort of stair-step graph rather than a nice smooth curve. So you can see here, we've got this insect as an egg, then it's going to hatch, it's going to have its first big period of growth, then it's going to go through its first instar, hits its first ecdysis or its first molt, big period of growth there, second instar. Ecdysis, big period of growth, third instar. Ecdysis, period of growth, fourth. Ecdysis, fifth instar. Final ecdysis to the adult stage. So it leads to this stair-step look or this discontinuous growth curve when you have this type of molting. All right. We've talked about growth, we've talked about molting, we've talked about everything. Now we're done for the week. Let me know if you have any questions.